Well, good afternoon. We're really excited to be in Doral. We have a number of Venezuelan Americans who, like many Americans, and I know a lot of Floridians, are very angered by the Biden administration's recent attempt to legitimize the brutal Maduro regime in Venezuela. And this is something that is unfortunately become part of a pattern with the Biden administration. I think if you look at people throughout South Florida that have connections in different countries in the Western Hemisphere, what we see from the Biden administration is basically thumbing their nose at millions of people here in our state when they take FARC off the list in Colombia. When they sit idly by, they don't lift a finger to help the democracy protesters in Cuba who were fighting against that decades-long dictatorship, and now to go in hat in hand and legitimizing Nicolas Maduro, who's been responsible for a lot of atrocities and has driven that country into the ground, along with, of course, his predecessor, Hugo Chavez. So we are here to speak out about that. I believe that this country should be energy independent. We have a huge amount of energy reserves in this country. You look at how these gas prices are impacting consumers in Florida and throughout the country. It wasn't just because of the Russia. They've been going up consistently since January 20th, 2021. That's just a fact. And so now we're in a situation where I just saw $4.30 a gallon for unleaded, and it's continuing to go up. We could end up $5, $6 a gas before you even know it, and it could even get much higher than that. And we got folks that have to go to work. They've got to take their kids to school. They can't just walk. I mean, especially in Miami, a lot of people have to commute. So this is a huge, huge blow to a lot of people and their family budgets. And part of the reason we're in this situation is because the Biden administration has had a policy of really kneecapping the American energy industry. This is based on ideology. They don't want us producing like we did under the Trump administration. So they've done a series of things like stop Keystone, they're closing Anwar, they're not allowing permits for production on federal lands. There's all these different things that not only have had an effect on what would be done in those instances, but also I think a general chilling effect where people know this is not an administration that's energy friendly. So now we're in a situation where people are really, really hurting. And rather than just recognize that, rather than acknowledge that their policies have been ineffective, they are trying to justify what they're doing to say no more in America, and they're going to Maduro. They're going potentially to the Ayatollah in Iran. So you say you don't want to do with Putin because he's a dictator. Fine, I'm all for that. But then don't turn around and go to Maduro, who has committed all kinds of atrocities. So needless to say, we've got a lot to discuss. So I'm really happy to be joined here by Florida's Lieutenant Governor, Jeanette Nunez. The congressman from this area, my friend Mario Diaz-Balart. Ernesto Ackerman, the president of Independent Venezuelan American Citizens. Lorenzo Di Stefano, owner of El Rapazo Restaurant. Rafael Gottinger, he's the president of the Venezuelan American Medical Association. He actually just came from surgery, so thank you for being here. Carines Moncada, Venezuelan radio journalist. Thank you. Juan Fernandez, founder of Gente de Petróleo. And Leslie Simon, president of the Venezuelan American Chamber of Commerce. So we all know the destruction that we've seen in Venezuela at the hands of both Chavez and Maduro, and this is what leftist authoritarianism does to a society and does to a country. And what we've seen over many, many years has been an absolute disgrace, and we've had people all throughout our country recognize, but particularly here in Miami-Dade County, recognize that this Maduro regime is not a regime that you legitimize. It's not a regime that you prop up. It's a regime that we want to see driven from Venezuela and driven from power. What the Biden administration's doing is really turning back the clock prior to the Trump administration's policy, which sought to isolate Maduro. And they're now in a position where they're doing these back channels, which is going to legitimize Maduro. And that's a mistake, and it's not something that is necessary to be able to meet America's energy needs. And so the policies that we've seen in Venezuela have been incredibly destructive. I think prior to Biden taking office, under the Trump administration's policies, the Maduro regime really was a pariah on the world stage. We had a lot of engagement to try to help the opposition. Of course, that didn't pan out quite as much as we hoped. There was a time when we thought there may be imminent change, and it just didn't get there. But the Trump administration was willing to sanction officials in the Maduro regime. They were willing to go after the lifeblood, the oil industry that really props Maduro up. Now we're in a situation, as I mentioned, where you have a totally different energy policy. We were the world's leading producer, energy independent. We didn't need to rely on these countries to the extent we are now, given the increase in energy prices. And so they're trying to figure out an easy way out of this. And rather than just unleash American production, they are thinking going to Iran and going to Venezuela. The increased energy prices, it's not just reflected at the gas pump. All these different industries rely on energy. So what you see in the grocery store, the skyrocketing prices, that is also partially as a result of higher energy prices. You look at all the bills that you pay, all this stuff, and there's other factors too, but the energy is really doing a lot. There's also a lot of inflation because of printing trillions and trillions of dollars in Washington, D.C. You can't do that infinitum and not have some serious response. And so we're seeing that now with 8% inflation, the highest inflation in 40 years. You have people that have jobs, they're even doing better in terms of higher income, and then the inflation just comes and it's like a huge tax, and people can't get ahead when that happens. So it's a huge, huge problem, and they're not doing what is necessary to address it in total, but certainly on this energy, huge opportunities for us to really unleash American production. It's interesting. There's a San Francisco-based NGO, Global Energy Monitor, which they're opposed to American energy development. They're celebrating that $244 billion in American liquefied natural gas projects are unable to move forward because lenders are afraid to invest because of the regulatory climate that we see in the United States. So I think it's a bad thing if we have energy that could be cheaper and more affordable for people, that's being kept on the sidelines because of the policies that we see in Washington, D.C. So if you look at what's going on with Russia and Ukraine, hitting Putin in energy, some of the other things they're doing where it's like if you're a Russian citizen living abroad, you can't use a credit card. I don't know how that's hurting Putin. The only way to really deal with Putin is to take away his lifeblood, which is the energy revenue. The problem is most of that is going to Europe. A lot of those countries are not in any position to be energy independent at all. We could help fill some of that, I think. But a lot of them, over many years, have helped to empower Putin with their policies. They have not taken energy security seriously. They haven't taken their defense commitments, quite frankly, seriously. And so now we're in a situation where Putin's been able to flex a lot of muscle, although I think he's miscalculated the resistance that he's faced, and I don't think it's going to end well for him. But you hit him with the energy, then what do you do in the United States to make sure that people just aren't paying more than they already are? The answer is American energy independence. Biden's answer Biden's answer is to prop up Nicolas Maduro. So we're saying here today, no, we do not accept the fact that you are legitimizing a murderous tyrant, and we stand with the people in Venezuela who are seeking freedom, and we stand with the people in South Florida who want to see a free Venezuela. So it's an honor to have so many great people here, so I want to introduce them. We're going to go around the horn. They're all going to say their piece, and then we'll have a little bit of a discussion. So, Jeanette, you want to kick it off?
Sure. Well, thank you, Governor, and it's such a pleasure to be here amongst so many Venezuelan Americans in my hometown, but in addition, elected officials and fellow freedom fighters from other parts of the hemisphere that are united in our call for freedom. And so I think it's clear, Governor DeSantis and I both stand with our Venezuelan brothers and sisters in search of freedom and democracy. And I also think it's clear that the disastrous policies of Biden, from everything from the border to now negotiating with terrorists and dictators, is something that I think that we have a responsibility as leaders in the free state of Florida, the state that has the largest number of Venezuelan Americans, to stand up and to unite and call on the Biden administration and call him out, because what he is doing is truly a travesty. And so I think I've shared this story before. My parents came here in 1961, fleeing communist Cuba. We had many of our family members that followed the same path, but we had family that chose in the early 80s to go to Venezuela, and they've made their life there. They were able to establish careers and raise their children, and sadly, they had to lose their homeland, not once, but twice, and they've had to move to other countries. So for me, it's personal. I also think that what the governor stated is absolutely correct. Biden's policy of choosing Venezuela's crude oil over domestic production and being energy independent here at home is not only politically unpalatable, but it is a sign of weakness to our enemies across the globe. And so the democratic aspirations of the freedom-seeking people in Venezuela, I believe, are worth more than just a few barrels of foreign oil from our enemies. And so we all know that Nicolas Maduro is a murderous thug, and we shouldn't breathe new life into his reign of terror. And for the Biden administration to meet in secret, I think was a huge PR boost for him across the globe. But yet here, in our hometown, in South Florida and in the free state of Florida, it's a demoralizing betrayal of those who have risked everything, perhaps some of you in this room, to oppose Maduro and his cronies. And so for us, we are proud to stand with our community here. We are proud in calling out what we believe is a folly on behalf of the Biden administration, emboldening Maduro's dictatorship and their obsession with eroding our own energy independence in order to appease the radical left that has taken over not only their party, but his administration. So I want to thank the governor for his commitment. I want to say just a few words in Spanish. Gracias, Gobernador DeSantis, por estar aquí en Doral, para unirnos con los líderes venezolanos americanos aquí en este tema tan importante. Nosotros estamos comprometidos con lo que es la búsqueda de la libertad y la democracia. Y debido a la política desastrosa de Biden, lamentablemente hemos visto que el presidente nos está fallando continuamente al pueblo americano, especialmente en lo que es el sector de energía. El presidente Biden ha decidido negociar con el tirano, con el régimen venezolano, para obtener petróleo en vez de producirlo aquí en nuestro gran país. Yo creo que los venezolanos que han luchado y todos los que se han unido en la lucha para la libertad, es vergonzoso ver que un presidente por unos cuantos barriles de petróleo está dispuesto de virarle la espalda. Estas reuniones que ha tenido la administración de Biden en secreta con el régimen déspota de Maduro ha traicionado aquí a aquellos que han arriesgado sus vidas, tal vez algunos de ustedes. Y por eso estoy muy orgullosa de estar unida con el gobernador y con tantos aquí oficiales electos para seguir hablando de este tema, porque lo que ha hecho el presidente es una traición y nosotros aquí en el estado de la Florida continuaremos apoyando a nuestros hermanos venezolanos y todos los que están en búsqueda de la libertad.
Okay, Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart.
Thank you, Governor. Governor, before I say anything else, I have always done the following. I always start, if you will forgive me, I always start by thanking a group of people that are not here. I do that in small groups and in large groups. Those of you that know me know that I do that, right, Fabio? I always start by thanking the folks that are never in the meetings or even in the fun things or the tough things or in the celebrations, but they're the men and women who allow us to live in freedom. So let's first start by thanking the men and women of the United States Armed Forces. And Governor, because of your leadership, we're also in a state that reveres our first responders and our law enforcement. Thank you for what you do to keep us safe. And I saw that the mayor of Hialeah is here, Stephen Boble. Steve, privileged to have you here. While I'm thanking people, let me thank a person who I got to know when he was in the United States House of Representatives. A person who stood up for us as a member of the Armed Forces of the United States, who fought for freedom, has always stood for freedom, and who is the greatest governor in the entire country, Governor DeSantis, Ron DeSantis.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks.
Governor, thank you for bringing us together on such an important reason, for such an important reason. It looks like the President of the United States is looking for oil from everywhere except from North America, except from the United States of America. And let's be very clear what he is doing now in these secret talks with the Maduro regime. He is betraying Venezuela. He is betraying the future of Venezuela. He is betraying the freedom of Venezuela, and that is something that we will not stand for. And we've seen this kind of betrayal in the past. We've not seen a betrayal like this, however, since really the 60s, since the Kennedy betrayal of the cause of a free Cuba. And not only, by the way, is he betraying the Venezuelan people and the cause of freedom, but he is also hurting the national security interests of the United States. Maduro not only is a despot, who, by the way, is under investigation for crimes against humanity, he also happens to be one of Putin's strongest allies in this hemisphere. And for this president to think that he can quietly betray the cause of freedom, quietly hurt the national security interests of the United States, by the way, also hurt the environment at the same time, and that people are going to stay silent? Well, with all due respect to the President of the United States, that is not going to happen. We will not stay silent. The people in Venezuela deserve solidarity, not betrayal. The cause of the Venezuelan freedom is non-negotiable, and we will continue to insist and speak out so that hopefully this president will not commit this latest betrayal against people who have fought, stood up for their freedom, who deserve our solidarity, our respect, our commitment. So, to the President of the United States, if you continue to think that you can betray the cause of Venezuelan freedom and that you're going to be able to get away with it with impunity, I have news for you. You will not be able to betray the Venezuelan cause of freedom with impunity. We will not ever forget. If I may, muy brevemente en español. Este presidente parece estar empecinado a buscar petróleo en todas partes del mundo, de los enemigos de la libertad y de los enemigos de la democracia y los enemigos de los Estados Unidos, pero rehúsa buscar el petróleo que existe aquí en los Estados Unidos. Y ahora, en estas negociaciones secretas con el régimen de Maduro, el presidente Biden cree que va a poder realmente traicionar al pueblo venezolano, a la causa de la libertad de Venezuela, al futuro de Venezuela, y que lo va a poder hacer en secreto. Pues que se entere nuestro presidente Joe Biden. Esta comunidad, los que amamos la libertad, no vamos a permitir que traicione a Venezuela, a la libertad de Venezuela, con impunidad. Gracias a todos ustedes por no confundirse. Estamos en un momento clave. Si los Estados Unidos, el presidente de los Estados Unidos va a poder traicionar al pueblo de Venezuela, o si vamos a exigir que cambie de curso y que se ponga del lado de la causa de la libertad. Este es el momento, seguiremos luchando y una vez más, repito, gracias a este hombre que yo conocí en la Cámara de Representantes de los Estados Unidos. Él sirvió en las Fuerzas Armadas de los Estados Unidos luchando por la libertad de los Estados Unidos. Siguió luchando por la libertad dentro del Congreso y ahora es el mejor gobernador de todos los Estados Unidos, el gobernador DeSantis. Gracias.
All right. Thank you. Okay, so what we'll do, we're going to go around for all the panelists. So we'll start with Ernesto Ackerman. Just say who you are, a little bit about yourself, and then weigh in on this Venezuelan issue, however you feel is appropriate. So we'll start with you, Ernesto.
Thank you, Governor, for your support to us, Lieutenant, my congressional brother, Mario. I left Venezuela in 1989, and I left it when it was February of 1989, when we had something called El Caracazo, but it was, the whole country was burned. Very similar to what they did here when George Floyd. I'm also a son of a concentration camp survivor. She born in Slovenia, but now is Ukraine. Because all these communist invasions, she has to speak 7 languages, because every time they invaded, she had to learn the new language. So I became a professional anti-socialist, because I didn't see it in movies, I didn't read it in books, I just saw it personally. And then I see the same happening in Venezuela, and that's why I left and came to a free country and to a democratic country and a capitalist country. And that's where I want to live. 1,600 miles from here, we have Iran, Hezbollah, Cuba, everything. In a country where today we have a big dictator and a criminal. We're paying $15 million for his head. He is in the court, in the international court, and secretly, our president, behind our backs, behind the president that is recognized by this country, Juan Guaidó, he goes and talks to this criminal. Criminals talk to criminals. We don't talk to criminals. I say this is like going now commission of the president to talk to Chapo in the jail to get some information from Chapo. What kind of information he can give you? He's a criminal. He has to be in jail, and that's where Maduro belongs. I can keep talking about inflation, everything that we know, gas prices. I suffer all that. I have all my family here, so we suffer all that. But my concern is that these people is injecting socialism into community, into our community. They gave us to the Venezuelans a little candy with the TPS, and now they go and do this destruction of the whole country for a little candy of the TPS that nobody is gonna end up in anything. So I ask you, or I beg you, let's go into the schools. Mario is very knowledge on our program. when we brought students from Venezuela and we teach them about socialism and we show them a free country because we were in a democratic government. So let's do now the backwards. Let's put it backwards now. Let's bring those students that were here at that time to talk to our students here and explain what is socialism. And let's teach our students in the universities and college what is socialism and how it starts. It starts like this.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so Lorenzo from El Rapazo Restaurant, go ahead and you floor is yours.
Mr. Governor. I came to this great country in the year 2000. Thanks God for my continuous work effort and the opportunity of business that this great nation gave me. I succeed in the restaurant industry by founding the Venezuelan food brand in Miami and Broward with the name of El Arepaso Dos. I was sure that the United States of America will be a better future for my children because by that time I already understood little by little that my country, Venezuela, had fallen into the wrong hands. It was under a socialist administration with communist ideas of Cuban Castroism. Also, I cannot fail to mention the high crime rate in Caracas, the capital, and the main cities of Venezuela. I cannot deny that the idea of returning to Venezuela was always present in my mind, but at the same time, that idea was disappearing due to all the atrocities, the expropriation of private property and jail to those who resist. In short, there was no hope of prosperity and much less of any change of government because the electoral institutions were already taken by Chavismo. From the location of my restaurant in Miami and Broward, I organized my best to confront the Castro Chavismo that had taken over Venezuela, slowly destroying the middle class and making the people eat from the garbage. Hundreds of rallies and press conferences were held in my establishment. I gave all my effort to work against the narco-criminal's puppet of Havana, Nicolás Maduro. For me and many others Venezuelans, it was a great disappointment to have heard in the news last Saturday a delegation from the Biden administration visited Venezuela to negotiate its oil and perhaps a possible lifting of the sanction imposed under the administration of our former President Donald Trump. This action of this administration represents a big slap in the face to all Venezuelans who have not stopped fight for the freedom of our people and insult all the relatives of the student victims who today occupy thousands of graves in Venezuela cemeteries. The administration of President Biden once again demonstrates to the world the weakness of his government, the first being the withdrawal of American troops from Afghanistan. The discrep that Biden administration caused the Venezuelan opposition has no name. How can it be explained that the United States, with 60 other countries in the world, recognize Juan Guaidó as the legal president of Venezuela, and the American delegation sent by the Biden government holds a meeting with the illegal tyrant communist narco Nicolás Maduro? It is inexplicable and unacceptable. Many Venezuelan Americans feel concerned to hear that President Biden is not going to finance Russia's war with Ukraine. But it doesn't matter to buy oil and fill the pockets of a terrorist narco trafficker who has killed young students and keeps thousands of political prisoners under torture unless the distribution of drugs reaching North American territory. We can't understand it. We think that the socialists have already penetrated America, and the administration of President Biden is allowing the evil ideology to advance. Governor DeSantis, we Venezuelans have seen the socialists and communists take over a country, and we do not want, nor can we let, that history to repeat itself in this great nation. As a businessman, I'm concerned about the continuous inflation, the high cost of living, and gasoline. In my particular case, I'm waiting for a new location to set up my business in Doral again. I don't know if this will be possible because investing today is not the same as it was years ago. Today, we businessmen are scared of opening new business. The risk of losing the investment is much higher than in the past. But I must recognize, and at the same time, thank you, that under your administration as a governor of Florida, you have given everything in favor of businessmen, demonstrating in the policies adopted in time of pandemic. Thank you, Governor. To conclude, I tell you that Venezuelan Americans will work to ensure that in November 2022, the Republican Party once again has a majority in Washington in order to stop the radical left that intends to lead our nation to total anarchy.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Okay, Dr. Gottinger, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and say your piece?
Sure. I'm in a kind of the same boat as Ernesto, and I want to briefly mention about that because Gottinger is not really Gottinger, it's God Thinker. And my father was born in Hungary, my mother in Romania. My father and my mother was both in different camps, in the concentration camps. My father was in Auschwitz, and as a matter of fact, my son right now just visited Auschwitz yesterday with a group from UF and other schools in the country. And 2 days ago, he texted me and said, Papi, I'm seeing here some Ukrainians. Can I get some money to help? And I say, yes, I can give $20. I say, 20 and more. Why I mention that? Because I remember as Ernesto all my life the story of my father who came to Venezuela, who was a free country with a lot of opportunities where I was able to study medicine. My father actually was 30 kilograms, 70 pounds when he was rescued by the Americans. And I never forget what is to help and to help the one in need. That's probably why I like to always help in different missions. That's why, as the president of Venezuelan American Medical Association, we have focused a lot on helping not only the doctors who come to the USA, which a lot of them are working as valet parkings in stores, but also to the humanitarian crisis in Venezuela. You and me and Lieutenant has said in the past about how we can help on that crisis. That crisis has not stopped. There's still children dying every day because of lack of food and nutrition. There's people dying of cancer because of lack of medication. There's still people looking to have surgeries. And I don't know if you have an idea, when you have surgery here, you go to the hospital and that's it. In Venezuela, in the public health care system, people have to buy everything in the black market, even the anesthesia drugs, which are illegal to get. Why I mention that? Because the whole humanitarian crisis had deepened and deepened on all these years. And everything has been masked by COVID, and nobody talks about that anymore. But with this opening of relationship, what will happen is that will make more harder and deeper the crisis that we're seeing. We know about the crisis. We know how many people are dying every single day in Venezuela. That is not being seen right now, but with this opening, what you're doing is allowing the black market to get more medications to be sold in the black market for the patient, and the crisis will get worse and worse. And that's why we are so concerned what's going on right now.
Great. Okay, thank you. All right. Carines Mancada, journalist originally from Venezuela, now hosting a show here in Miami. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Governor. First of all, as a Venezuelan who would like nothing more than democracy back in my native country, but mostly as an U.S. citizen that has been here for 32 years and has seen many of the things happening here that I saw back in Venezuela that are taking us into the wrong path as a country, I want to thank you for your leadership. Yes. You are creating here in Florida the model that others should follow in the rest of the country in order for us to avoid from becoming another socialist, communist country. So thank you very much for being the retaining wall between patriotism, capitalism, and socialism and communism. So that being
Thanks.
said, I've devoted my 25-year career to informing and condemning. Congressman Mario knows about that. Condemning the Cuba and the Venezuelan dictatorships. And now I see what they're doing here to our kids, to our family, and what they want to do with this country. My concern is very simple. Why would you take the business from buying oil from one dictator and give it to another dictator, which the previous administration had defined them and denounced them as dictators? Why would you sit down with Nicolas Maduro and their people, a man that this country has offered $15 million to capture him? Why would you do that? By sitting down with Maduro, by sitting down with the Venezuelan regime, you're endorsing him as a leader of Venezuela, and you're hurting the people of Venezuela. So how is that benefiting all the Venezuelans that are dying because they have no medicine, because they have no food, because they can't afford to live the way they should be living? It's obvious that they want to eliminate the sanctions that the previous administration have placed on them, and I'm sure they're working on it. And it's very simple. The United States do not negotiate with criminals. If we sit down with them, it's like sitting down with Pablo Escobar or sitting down with Hezbollah. We know that Hezbollah, we know that Cuba, we know that Russia has ties with Venezuela. So why would you sit down with criminals? So I think this has been, the war has been the perfect excuse for the Biden administration to sit down with the Venezuelan dictatorship, and God knows what's coming out of them. But it's very concerning because I think we're farther away than we were last year under the previous administration. We're farther away from freedom in Venezuela.
Great. Thank you. Okay, Juan Fernandez, can you talk about your Agente de Petróleo and how you see the situation?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Governor and Lieutenant and Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart. I will start saying that we are now in a fight between principles, values, and interests. And I think that all of us which are in this session today are fighting for principles. And I thank you for that too. I was working at PDVSA in the year that Mr. Chavez came to power. We realized from that very moment that Venezuela couldn't be a respectable, secure, and reliable supplier to the market, including the U.S. For you to know, at some point in time, we exported to this country from Venezuela up to 2 million barrels per day, which is far more than the Biden administration is looking in Venezuela right now with Maduro. So we decided to say the country is going the wrong way. We have to raise our voice. And we did it. We came to fight in the year 2002. We joined a general strike in Venezuela. I was with other colleagues of mine living also in this city, fired from PDVSA with a whistleblowing by Chavez, and then in the general strike too. And the simple way to continue living was to leave the country and be in exile. But even with that, we continue to fight for principle and values. And we will do it no matter that Mr. Biden or whoever is going to be at the White House is looking for Maduro to keep power in Venezuela. I am sure that all my friends and colleagues from the oil industry were out of Venezuela for Chavez. We are going to keep doing that. And I also would like to tell you that maybe the advice that Biden is receiving is very bad, because I think that the lobby who is around him, the interests which are around him are pushing for him to say, listen, we are in a crisis around the world. Russia is, a big and important producer. Imagine what is going to happen if we stop crude oil from Russia and prices are going to, heaven and so on. listen, we can go to Venezuela. There is an opportunity there. We can work there. I mean, very easily we can produce oil and replace all the Russian supply. And I'm going to tell you here to everybody that that is not true. That is a big lie, because the oil industry in Venezuela is completely destroyed. And even more, if you are looking for supply from Venezuela, then Maduro has to cut ties with China and Cuba. So how come do you think Maduro is going to do that when he is outspoken saying that Russia is my alliance, Putin is my friend? So imagine, if you talk then for, let's say, the hard data, the operational constraints that are in Venezuela in place, the financial constraints that are in Venezuela in place, the lack of what we call the rule of law. So how come an investor is going to be in Venezuela putting money at risk? I think if we can do something, is really, and I know that all here are in agreement with this, that first that we need to do is to get out of Maduro from Venezuela. If we get out of Maduro from Venezuela, then that oil-rich country could be again a safe, secure supplier to the market. So that's the way that we need to do things. First, out of Maduro, democracy back in Venezuela, rule of law back in Venezuela, conditions for investors to go in Venezuela. And let me tell you something that I think is also a clear answer that the investors are doing in Venezuela. Recently, Total, which is a French company, Equinor, which is a Norway company, even Repsol, the Spanish oil company, left Venezuela. How come now American companies are going to Venezuela from Russia? ExxonMobil exit investments in Russia. BP, another big one, is leaving also the oil industry in Russia. So how are we going to accept that American companies are going back to? I mean, it's something that it doesn't make any sense at all. So I think that I'm very passionate about this, but let me finish. Just saying that, yes, I would like to be Venezuela. Again, secure supplier to the market. First step, get out of Maduro. Thank you.
Great. I just saw Congressman Jimenez, so I want to welcome Carlos here, former mayor of the county and now up in Washington. Okay, Leslie Simon, president of the Venezuelan American Chamber of Commerce. Go ahead.
Thank you, Governor, and thank you for all. I see a few family faces have been supporting and helping the Venezuelan citizens who arrive here and who are living in our country. As Juan also said, we hear very often in the last days that Venezuela is fixed. What a great dilemma. It all depends from which side of Venezuela you look at, whether from the outside or whether from the inside. And our concept of fixing, it depends on what patterns of comparison or expectation you're expecting. I only know that there's a lot of great citizens, committed people, outside and inside, to get every day to fix, and have seen how many citizens have created spaces for citizen participation, training spaces, spaces for inclusion and peace entrepreneurships. And I really don't see how this secret meeting will support and help them. But the truth is that in Venezuela is submerged in a serious economic and social crisis. I was recently in Venezuela, only 3 weeks ago. And yes, Caracas is very pretty, and you will see it very nice. But the truth is, the crisis in the hospitals, the crisis in the economic, and the crisis in we see it from the affiliates and the members of our Chamber of Commerce who have business in Venezuela and have been, some of them have lost their business and have been able to reconstruct the infrastructure in Venezuela is totally lost. So to travel from one city to another city, your life can be risked, or you can be robbed, or just because the infrastructure doesn't work. My father used to be a color worker. At the 38 years, he graduated from high school in Venezuela. And the company where he used to work gave him the opportunity to come to this lovely country. And at the 36 years, my father was a metallurgic engineer and with an MBA of business administration. That's a family where I grew through, where he showed us that if you're on your knee, you just straight up, and you adjust, I don't know how to say that well in English, te sacudes las rodillas, and then because you have 2 feet and 2 hands and your head to work and move forward. And that's what I really love to see from my country, and that's the opportunity this country also gives to us. So thank you.
Thank you. Let me ask Mario, we obviously have elections coming up in November. You have Biden's party controls everything right now. If we were to see a change in the Congress, what could you guys do in terms of, promoting American energy and not accepting policies that are legitimizing people like Maduro?
No, thank you, Governor. It would be a different world because you would have, for example, Mike McCall as chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, someone that you know well. You would have Michael Turner as chairman of the Intelligence Committee, as opposed to Mr. Schiff. It would be a total different world where we could have hearings. I mean, obviously, the administration, as you well talked about, one of the first things it did, it eliminated the pipeline, the domestic pipeline, but then took away the sanctions for the Russian pipeline, which is insane. As I mentioned a little while ago, not only, Governor, is this selling out the Venezuelan people and hurting the U.S. national security, but it's also bad for our environment, And so we would be able to hold the administration accountable. We would be able to bring them up under oath, individuals, about the decisions that they're making. And for example, just this issue now of these secret negotiations, we would be able to bring those folks to Congress to testify as to what are their intentions, what is it that they're doing. Again, it's night and day, and we would double down on doing everything that we can to produce domestic energy so that we do not have to rely either on the Middle East or on Russia. And Governor, one of the things that was kind of talked about here was this whole thing about now saying that they're going to be able to potentially get oil from Venezuela, as we just heard. That's false. I think this is just an excuse to be able to try to do what they've been wanting to do from day one.
Yep.
That's what this is. They were negotiating with Iran from day one. They unilaterally took away sanctions that existed against the Venezuelan regime from day one. They took the FARC off of the state terrorist organization list. This is another excuse, which is why we cannot let them get away with this. We cannot let this be done in the dark of night. We have to highlight it, and that's why, Governor, I am so grateful for your leadership.
Absolutely. And I think that's an important point, and it's true. Doing this end run to try to legitimize Maduro under the kind of illusion that this is going to help solve some of the energy problems, as you mentioned, this is not going to be a solution. Even if you don't care about democracy, it's just the market just not there. They don't have. There's a lot of problems, and so they're using this situation that we find ourselves in with what's going on in the world. Obviously, the rising energy prices that have been consistent since Biden's taken office, and they're using that as a pretext. As an excuse to be able to do something that from the day they took office, this is what they've wanted to do. They wanted to prop Maduro up. They want to deal with the Ayatollah in Iran, and we've already seen, how weak they are with President Xi of China. You look at what's going on since Afghanistan, how we had those 13 service members killed because of the ineptitude. They left all these Americans behind. They left billions of dollars worth of equipment. all of these dictators and all these foreign capitals, yes, in Moscow and Beijing and Tehran, and yes, Cuba, Venezuela, they were watching that, and what they saw is you have an American president that is weak. You have an American president that is not capable of leading. And so that whetted their appetite. And so you see Putin going into Ukraine. They took the sanctions off the pipeline. They were sending the signal that, yeah, you know, a minor incursion, go ahead and do it, basically. And so this has been so much, these problems have been, in many respects, created by the Biden administration's inept policies. And so it's just frustrating to have to be here and get everyone together that they're actually trying to do these secret negotiations with somebody who we all know has been instrumental in destroying Venezuela. And so we're not going to let him get away with it. I can tell you that. We are going to fight back, and we're going to make sure everybody down here in South Florida has a voice.
Can I add just one more
Yep.
thing? And you asked about the difference after the elections. You know, let me just give you, and I'm glad that my dear friend and colleague, Congressman Carlos Jimenez is here. He would become a subcommittee chairman on the Homeland Security Committee. That's the difference an election can make. And our colleague, Maria Elvira Salazar, would become a major player in the Foreign Affairs Committee. So again, you cannot minimize the importance of elections. And so, God willing, there will be a way to outbalance now one-party control, radical left-wing control in Washington. We're seeing the consequences of one-party control.
Right.
Sorry about that, Governor.
Ernesto, what's been the response in the Venezuelan community since this news has come out that they're going to try to cut deals with Maduro?
Well, we also have some Democrats, and we welcome them, but they are very silent now. They don't talk. We don't hear them. It's like either I lost all my friends in Facebook or they're lost. So the community is very upset, and you see them. Today is a working day, and people come and listen to us. So, and I want to reinforce what the Congressman Diaz-Balart said. We have a very important election on November. We either completely give this country to the left, or we really turn this country back to what it was. We have a chance now in November, and I am working very hard to get this country back to, all of us came from South America, Latin America, running from this system that they want to impose here. So the only way to not let them do it is voting, go vote, and vote right.
Thank you.
Governor,
Okay.
I was going to say that someone like Karines has a great pulse on the community, and I'm sure your listeners have called in. I would love for her to share.
Yeah, absolutely.
They say their piece. Thank you, Governor. You know, yeah, Governor. We get dozens of calls every day, and we don't open the show 4 hours because we have to do a show, but we do open our lines, and everybody. But I do get literally like hundreds of messages through my social media because I've dedicated, since this administration started, I left my private life on the side, and I'm focusing on informing people of what this administration is doing. Whoever follows me knows. I'm very open and very outspoken. So we get hundreds of messages, and everybody's concerned about where this country is going to be in 3 years. We did so much progress in the last administration, and we're literally going down hard in just 1 year, but we still have 3 more years to go. People are concerned what's going to happen in midterms. People are concerned what's going to happen in 3 years, but mainly about the transparency of elections. We know with Florida we're taken care of, and you're making sure that this is taken care of, but we are concerned about the rest of the country because we definitely cannot trust. You cannot mention irregularities on the air. You cannot talk about fraud. You cannot talk about certain words, but we are concerned. And that's what everybody expresses every single day. Even yesterday, some Venezuelans, like Ernesto said, a lot of them are silent. They're not speaking, even though they criticize us during the whole campaign. But even some Democrats are saying, this is not what I signed up for. This is not who I voted for. And I was deceived. And they're very upset.
Yeah, and in Florida, we take these elections very seriously. If you look at 2020, we counted 99% of the votes, like 11 million votes by midnight, and had results, and it was transparent. And then, like you saw these other states, they were fumbling around. I mean, some of the states take weeks to just count the votes. You're just like, what the hell's going on? And people were actually saying, why can't states be like Florida when it comes to running elections? They did not used to say that about Florida, I can tell you that. And so we've put work into it, and a lot of the supervisors have worked hard, but we also saw, a lot of concerning things in other parts of the country. So last year, we signed legislation banning ballot harvesting in the state of Florida. We signed legislation to have ID for absentee ballots and no mass mailing of unsolicited ballots. They'll send them in California to people who haven't lived in California for 10 years. It's ridiculous. And then maybe most importantly, we ban Zuckerbucks in the state of Florida. Facebook and Zuckerberg, they poured $420 million into these nonprofit groups, and the non-quote nonprofits would go in and they'd go into local election offices and they'd basically commandeer them. They'd flush it with cash, they'd bring in partisan operatives, and they'd basically run the election for partisan purposes effectively. And so it was it never been done before, I think, in our country. It was a huge, I think, had a huge impact. And so that is done. That is not allowed in Florida, and we put the kibosh on that. And now this year we're signing I will be signing legislation. We're increasing penalties for ballot harvesting, because what you've seen, what's gone on in like Atlanta, some of these places, you'll have people going around picking up hundreds of ballots and dumping them. We don't want that, and so it's going to be a third-degree felony in the state of Florida if you are ballot harvesting and are engaging in that type of conduct. But what we also are doing is making sure that there are enforceable times when the voter rolls have to be cleaned, because you have people that will move, and there's people that vote in multiple states. We don't want that. Obviously, if someone passes away, I know they vote in Illinois when they're passed away, but that's not the way it's going to work, in Florida. So there's things you got to do there, which I think we're doing more than anyone. And then we're creating a unit in state government solely focused on election integrity and enforcing election laws. And so you have people that, if there's complaints about fraud or irregular anything, you're going to have investigators that are going to know the election laws. They're going to be able to go, and we're going to be able to hold people accountable. And the thing is, if you just do it once, if someone gets caught and they actually get brought to justice, a lot of people aren't going to want to mess with it. The people that do it think they can get away with it, and so that's what they do. So what I would tell Floridians, we've done more than anybody else in the country, and I am very, very confident telling you that in these elections, your vote's going to count, and we're going to make sure the process has integrity. So restaurant, how's it doing?
Well.
Yeah. I don't think restaurants are doing better any other place than Florida. I think we're number one.
I'm retired right now.
Well, the thing is like, you had people like Fauci. He hated restaurants, right? He's always complaining about Florida because we had restaurants and you do. And the thing is like, he doesn't care about these restaurants, whether they make it. You have people that cook, you have servers, you have bartenders, you have all these people, and they have families to support. They have mouths to feed. These are real hardworking people, and he didn't care about that with his lockdown policies. And I think one of the things we're proud of in Florida, we saved the jobs of thousands and thousands of people in that industry. We've saved so many family businesses by rejecting Fauciism and making sure that they were able to earn a living. And the result is we have people moving restaurants from other states, to be able to come to Florida because they know as long as I'm around, they're going to be able to operate freely, and they have confidence in that.
That's true.
But this is how ridiculous it is. They kept saying like mostly 2020, 21 winter, they would say, you cannot eat indoors. Like, it's just so bad to eat indoors. And my view is like, you can make that decision for yourself. You don't close indoors, you let them make the decision. So that was like all a big thing. And so a lot of these places in other parts of the country, they said, okay, we don't want indoors, you got to eat outdoors. So they'd put tables outside, whatever. And in northern states in August, September, you can probably get away with that. Well, it starts to get cold. So what do? They enclose the outdoor dining in like an igloo that has way worse ventilation than what you would have inside an actual restaurant, but it's outdoors. And so therefore, and I just thought to myself, I see these structures. I saw them in Chicago, I saw them in New York, and I just think to myself, this is COVID theater. To say someone can't go inside a restaurant, but they can go in a poorly ventilated, enclosed area on the street, give me a break. And so we're glad you're doing well. We're glad that a lot of these businesses have done well. And they just revised our unemployment from 2021. We were in good shape. We were much lower than the national average all of 2021. They've now done that. Our labor force was pre-COVID, June of 21, one of the best. I think we're #1 for large states, in doing that. And so we're going to continue kind of leading the way. But if we weren't standing for freedom in Florida and doing what we did, that's right, a lot of these other states wouldn't have done it as well, and we could look like a Canada or some of these other places. And so we've led the way, and we're proud of doing that, but mostly we're proud that people are doing well and that people are able to work and businesses are able to succeed in the state of Florida.
By the way, where's Fauci in the last 2 weeks?
Well, the polling data has changed. The midterm elections are coming. They fear that, and honestly, it's a legitimate fear because voters know, those folks who criticize Florida. It's interesting. The people that criticize Florida all end up vacationing
That's
here
right.
the first time they get.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's one of the reasons the economy's been doing so well.
I know.
Is all these folks, including some of our colleagues that were so critical of Florida, where did they go?
Miami.
They come to
Florida.
Florida. They come to Florida.
But the thing is, and this is true, they want people to act like, okay, we're just gonna, we're moving on. The minute those elections are over, they will impose mandates if they feel the need to do that. They will impose restrictions, and so that will happen if those types of people are allowed to be put in power. And so, my view on that is they've put Fauci in the witness protection program because because he will say, no, you still should wear masks, and he's never going to say, be normal, go back to normal. And so they know that, and they know that that's not what people want. People want to be able to make decisions for themselves, and there's nothing wrong if on an individual basis you make a certain calculation. That's fine. We encourage you to do that, but it's wrong to mandate people and restrict people, and that will happen, I guarantee you, winter of 2022, any of those folks that are there, you are going to see that happen. The only way to make sure it doesn't happen is to have a nice big red wave. So we'll see. All right, thank you guys.
All right, folks, thank you so much for joining us here at Golden State Times for that live event. Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, talking about expanding American energy and how the Biden administration wants to line Maduro's pockets. And that's exactly what's going on. So we went from getting our oil from Russia to getting our oil from Venezuela. That is how crazy this is. And then we're going to be what? Negotiating with Iran? Negotiating with North Korea? That's what's going to happen next? Most likely, because it looks like Biden loves his dictators. And that's what's happening right now. So I hope that you guys enjoyed. This event wasn't being covered by no one other than Golden State Times. I don't know if you guys did notice that. So make sure you guys please share the live stream on social media. And don't forget to click the thumbs up button. Thank you so much, folks, for joining us here at Golden State Times. And make sure that you guys join us on the next one. If you're new to the channel, We encourage you to subscribe and click that notification bell. Also, don't forget to click the thumbs up button, as the thumbs up button helps us continue operation here on YouTube. It lets YouTube know that you guys are interested in watching our content and that you guys like our content. So make sure you guys click the thumbs up button. Also, if you'd like to help out Golden State Times directly, the best way by doing it is by becoming a member, clicking that join button. That way you help out Golden State Times. You guys get to use our custom emojis. If there's any patriots that are members in the chat, make sure you guys show everyone the custom emojis on there. Thank you so much to our members already in the chat. You guys are amazing. You guys help us out immensely. You guys keep us here on YouTube. You guys keep us going. Thank you so much for helping Golden State Times and supporting the free press. All right, folks, have a blessed rest of your day. God bless every single one of you guys. Don't forget to pray for peace, and we will see you guys here bright and early for more coverage. Also, we're continuing our coverage right now on our website, goldenstatetimes.com. But for live streams and stuff like that, we will see you guys bright and early Monday morning. Thank you so much, folks.